I'm being joined in the Law Enforcement Today studio with CEO Kyle Reyes as well. I am so excited about what God is doing. This has just been a really special opportunity tonight just to be up here in Connecticut, just the way things worked out. I am just so grateful to Kyle Reyes just to be able to be up here, to be able to do this Zoom here tonight, and for him to be able to join me. So I just want to just invite him in for a minute, just to share anything that kind of God's put on his heart to share with you all, and then we'll go from there.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
Everybody, good evening. I know many of you are probably exhausted if you're East Coast time like I am over here. I'm blessed to speak at all sorts of conferences and galas and events, and I'm never nervous, right? Like I'll get up there in front of 10, 15,000 people and never think twice about it. This is the first time in a long time I've been nervous. Like here in our own home in the Law Enforcement Today studio, when you asked me to do this, I thought, what do I, of all people, have to contribute that's going to have an impact in the couple of minutes here that's going to touch somebody or encourage them?
What's up, America? Time for another episode of Choir Practice. I've got my co-host here.
Hey, Bernie. Good morning. How's everybody doing today?
And we've got Jeremy Wade, our special guest from, originally from the other side of the country, but not anymore, right?
Yeah, I'm in Tennessee now, in Seattle.
So the idea behind Choir Practice is
that we get together generally to decompress after a day in law enforcement, whether it's a cocktail or non-alcoholic, but sharing the solidarity, the brother and sisterhood of law enforcement, and the blessings of being together.
So we have people flying from all over the country. Once a month, we film out here at the studio in Connecticut, the Law Enforcement Today studio. And the idea behind the Whiskey Wall, it started years ago. We have a series called Behind the Uniforms. We invite active and retired emergency responders and veterans. They come out here, they bring a bottle of whiskey, we share a cocktail, they tell you a story about a good day on the job and a lousy day on the job, and then their name goes on the bottle goes on the wall. So this is truly a wall of stories, but we have, many guys don't drink. We rarely drink anything ourselves anymore, and so in those cases, they'll bring in some kind of a memento, something that they leave behind on the wall. So we had a rock from the top of Mount Everest. We've had Paul Butler brought his badge.
Yep.
And so we encourage you to take part in the series, but we also take part in something here internally whenever we're all together, whether we're breaking bread, whether we have meetings. We always, as an organization and as a family, start everything in prayer. And so we decided that instead of just doing that off camera, we should start doing that on camera, because we are in a place in society where we need God in our lives more than ever before. So we asked Jeremy, our guest, to lead us in prayer today.
Yeah. Dealer, just thank you for today. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the brave men and women serving to protect all of our communities across our country. I pray that you protect them, pray that you guide them, direct them, and that you're with their families that serve behind the badges. I pray that just as a nation, that we can turn to you and trust you in all that we do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
So we like to start off every episode with giving some shout outs to some of the incredible people, businesses out there that support us, that support the series. None of these, in the spirit of full disclosure, none of these are paid endorsements at all. People send us products, we give them shout outs, they send us patches, we say what's up. So I'm just going to go through real quick. Warrior 12, obviously my favorite apparel brand. I love this shirt. Trust in God, not politicians. I sent a picture of this shirt to my boy Eli Crane, my best buddy. He's a congressman out of Arizona now, former Navy SEAL. Had started a company called Bottle Breacher. They turned 50 cal bullets into bottle openers. And Eli was like, dude, they need to send these shirts to every single member of Congress. So love it. My friend, retired U.S. Marshal from Maryland, just sent us out his patch, the United States Marshal District of Maryland. So this is going up on our patch wall. We just had the Carolina Field Office, CID, send us their Vice and Narcotics Squad patch and challenge coin. So thank you guys, going on the wall and the challenge coin wall. Then we have obviously some Warrior, that's for you this time, Warrior 12 drinking wear. So these guys, I love this, makehoneygreatagain.com. It's obviously Daddy T, it's Trump. They sent us this, and if you go to makehoneygreatagain.com and you use promo code LET, they're actually putting $5 from every single sale into a fund to help wounded officers to get here to the Whiskey Wall to tell their story. So super cool. Thank you guys. Makehoneygreatagain.com. promo code LET. That is the paid endorsement, if you will.
There you go.
And then a couple more quick shout outs. So Sticky Holster, don't worry, these are all clear. They are unloaded for everyone who's going, oh my God, they have guns at the whiskey wall right now. Sticky Holsters sent us these holsters for everyday carry. Super cool stuff. These guys are huge supporters of law enforcement. So I said, you send us some holsters and we will give you a shout out. They make all different sizes. It literally sticks against you and holds in place. So it's great for everyday carry. I'm actually going to be carrying this one when I run. It sticks and it holds when I run. I know they don't promote that, but that's kind of cool stuff. And then last but not least, Go Pills. Really good friend of mine who he's retired military. Then he went into the financial industry. Then he ended up running a highly kinetic group, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Libya for the CIA. Super good dude. Works in counter-human trafficking now. He's doing some work with these guys, Go Pills. And they are for hypercognition. From what I heard from all my boys who served, this works spectacular, and these guys used it when deploying. All I know is that I think I have attention deficit disorder, and so we'll see if I make it through this episode now that I just took a couple. All right, I'm done. Thank you all. If you guys have stuff you want to send, if you support law enforcement, send it. We'll give you shout outs, and then we'll keep your stuff. So especially gun companies, they should start sending more stuff too.
Well, for me, it's more like sweatshirts, polo shirts, police departments. I will definitely rock them for you if you send them out extra large, please. And we'll be proud to do that. And also today, my coffee's in a red Solo cup to honor Toby Keith and his passing. Thank you for your music. Thank you for trying to keep America together in these troubled times. God rest your soul, my brother, and to your family and your fans. We are here with you.
So, who are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Jeremy Wade. I'm the executive director of Mission First Alliance as a nonprofit organization serving first responders nationally. I was a Seattle police officer for 13 years, left the department about 2 years ago. This is my patch here for you from the Seattle Police Department.
Awesome. Thank you, brother.
And t-shirt from Mission First Alliance for you.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yep. And Blue Line Bible from one of our ministry partners with Shield 616 out of Colorado Springs.
Awesome. Love it.
So the weird thing about you, man, is that I feel like every other day someone's like, yo, you got to meet this guy, Jeremy Wade. You got to meet Jeremy. It's actually kind of getting to the point where I don't know if it's laughable, ordained, or just creepy, because I'm telling you, man, constantly nonstop guys are like, you got to meet Jeremy. You got to meet Jeremy. You and I connected, I don't know, probably 6 months ago, maybe. And I fell in love with the organization and the work that you're doing, because it's a very unique nonprofit in the way that it's set up. We're going to dive into that a little bit later, but I want to kind of qualify you and your backstory in Seattle. Mm-hmm. Can we talk a little bit about that and sort of the end of your career there and what led up to it, and just kind of walk us through, man?
Yeah, I loved my time in the Seattle Police Department. I'm born and raised in that area. Got hired at 26. A week after my second child was born, went to the academy, and I was all in from day one. I remember my very first first shift on FTO ended in a SWAT call out where I was there for 6 hours after shift. And then it was one of my first shifts in my second rotation FTO that I located a bank robbery suspect that had just hit his third bank in 3 days that ended in him ramming another officer and then a robbery detective having to use lethal force on the suspect to stop him. So it was all in. I loved everything about the job. Got hired in 2008.
Now you've had quite a few accolades, right?
Yeah, I've got a chance to be in a few things. God had me in the right place at the right time a few different times. There was another incident with a partner that I went to the academy with that was an active shooter in a bar that we were some of the first through the door as we could hear gunshots still going on and people screaming inside the bar. And God was with us that day, and we were able to stop the suspect and save everyone on scene in that bar, including the bouncer out front that had been shot that we had to step past to get into the bar, and suspect's girlfriend in the bar who he was targeting and shot multiple times. So, I was involved in a few different incidents. And each one, I think, just gave me more resolve that this is where God wants me, that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. But each one, I think, also gave me a greater burden just to understand in the ways that the job was changing me and impacting me, and just the impact I could see on some of my coworkers too. So that really kind of changed the trajectory of my career in the Seattle Police Department.
I want to talk a little bit about the riots at the tail end. When did you retire?
In 2022.
Okay, so you were there. You went through this. I got to tell you, man, we have very candid conversations on this show about all things law and order and society. Bernie and I don't always agree on everything, but the one area that we've always stood fast on agreeing on is that you have to call out stupidity in law enforcement when you see it. And it blew my mind, candidly, to see that we surrendered a precinct to anarchists during all of this. But I'm sure that there are always different stories behind what goes on. Can you kind of walk us through what really happened, as much as you can or feel comfortable? Because we only see one side, right? Like, we see that this was seized and taken over and turned into this Chaz, this no cop zone. What was really happening in Seattle during all of this?
Yeah, I think that Seattle is a challenging city to work in, and as many other cities are as well. Protests are not uncommon in the Seattle area. Even in my time of 13 years, there were a number of protests that we dealt with on a regular basis. Our department, from my perspective, including the lieutenant that I last worked for, I think leads the nation in crowd control. And he was involved in training so many other departments around the country in crowd control. We deal with it so frequently. We're prepared for it and handle it in the best possible way for the best possible outcome for everyone involved, citizens in the city, those that are out, expressing their views. So I have great respect for the department and those who serve and those who are there to protect all people and different points of views. Those riots in 2020 were a whole different thing. It was just very different from the get-go. There was a lot more momentum behind it. There was a lot more people behind it. And we were dealing with it day in and day out. I think in the first 2 weeks, I was averaging probably around 20-hour days for 2 weeks straight, there day in and day out. In 2020, I had the opportunity to help start our wellness unit. I had been a full-time peer support coordinator and leading our peer support team. So I appreciated the opportunity, and I appreciated the leadership and just the opportunity to support the officers and the family members through that. So I was still left in a supportive role, but I was behind the lines. I was in the precincts. I was all over the department, doing my best to make sure everyone was taken care of, was there for them if they needed anything. I was at the hospital with every injured officer, and we had a lot of injured officers, just to support them, and then by proxy supporting spouses. And the spouses and family members at home were dealing with it just as much as anyone else. The officers were dealing with it in a big way, and we had 800 unarmed National Guard supporting us and mutual aid from all over the state supporting us. But it was challenging. They were long days, long hours, and not a lot of support from very many people in the city. There were even city council members on the front lines of the protests. So we definitely felt like we had kind of everyone against us, but doing the best we could.
So I heard someone in law enforcement make the analogy. They were in Seattle, and they said this was our Benghazi moment when the precinct was handed over. Any insight as to what the thought process was there? Because I'm looking at this from a non-law enforcement perspective, right? And I'm thinking, man, like if ever there was a time where we gave a blueprint to enemies of the country on how to beat law enforcement or how to destroy public safety. It's, hey, let's show them that when things get really bad, we're just going to hand over the police department to them. Mm-hmm. Am I crazy? Is that a bad way of looking at it? Like, what was really going on?
Yeah, I don't know the behind the scenes. I was definitely not privy to a lot of the behind the scenes, and I respect the leadership and just that there was difficult decisions being made. I know that we were holding a line that was a flashpoint, and was night after night after night was difficult. And officers were being injured, and it was a challenging situation. So, I don't know what led to those decisions. I know that we were trying to work through it day in and day out the best we could. I know that there was leadership saying the night before that we would never give it up. I mean, I even talked to officers on the Department of Military Experience saying that those riots were more challenging than some of their military combat experiences. And I think some of that just comes from the rules that we had to play by. Sure. That there were more and more just pressure on us to be less militaristic, have less equipment, have less lethal use. So more and more and more was being taken away from us. And I'm doing my best to support on the back end. And I was shocked at some of the stuff that I was even hearing from family members afterwards. My wife was even in a position of supporting spouses. And, even a couple of days after we gave up the precinct, I was hearing from spouses that were told that last night before we gave it up that, from their officers that here's where the will is, here's the code to the safe. If things continue down this trajectory, I may not be coming home tonight. We're outnumbered in those types of situations. We've got the advantage to the tactics and the things that we can use to control crowds in situations like that. But if too many of those things are removed from the equation, then it's not a good situation and isn't going to end well for anyone.
The fall of the precinct and the establishment of Chaz and everything, what did that do for officer morale? Was it helpful because the agency said, we're not going to put you in a position where you have to hold the line in something that you can't hold the line? Or was it demoralizing because they were like, well, if we give this up, where do we go now? Like, what was the general sentiment?
Very demoralizing. The precinct that I worked at for over 6 years on patrol was the East Precinct, the one that we gave up, where I was Officer of the Year at the precinct. I was involved in, active shooter at that precinct. I think, as you probably know, I can speak to too, Bernie, like you work at a precinct and that feels like home. You've got your locker there. That's where you go day in, day out. That's where you spend time with those that you consider family. There's pictures up on the wall. That was one of our Seattle precincts that had a memorial wall for all of our fallen officers. So anytime you have to take everything down off of the walls, you have to clear it out. You have to board it up, and you don't know what the outcome is going to be. It feels like you're giving up your home. And I think that that's how a lot felt. And so very, very demoralizing and just wondering, where do we go from here? And,
let's talk about your personal, in my opinion, looking at your stuff, your response to it, your resiliency, right? Mm-hmm. So what you didn't say, you kind of mentioned a little bit, you were an Officer of the Year. Folks, that's a big city. That's a big thing. And throughout all this, I know, from being law enforcement, when bad things happen, a lot of officers take it internally, turn their back on their communities and feel like everybody's the problem, but we're really the solution. I want to talk about some of the things that you did. Mm-hmm. You started the resiliency training. Let's talk about that first.
I think that was the Lord's timing and provision for some of the things that we just as a department had an opportunity to do. For 5 years, me being involved with peer support and training new officers, which led in 2018, which was one of our first mass exodus from the department of that year. But I respected the chief and the leadership for saying, we need this type of training. We need to take care of our officers. So myself and a few others were able to develop nearly a full day training class that was mandatory for the whole department at all ranks, to just recognize how do we manage our stress? How do we manage trauma? How are we and can we be resilient to survive a career, not just go home safely at the end of every shift, but how can we have something to actually go home to at the end of our, career, a solid family in place and everything. So I appreciated that training. I know that that's something that helped me through a lot of things I've been involved in, and then helped me come alongside other officers through riots and everything else. I think it was very timely and needed. And I think that it helped a lot of people. And in the moment, you're still going to be impacted by whatever you're dealing with. But it's how do you process it? How do you work through it? How do you manage it? Unfortunately, I wish that was mandatory training for all the family members, and it wasn't. And I think that that's always an area that departments always fall short on, is how do we support the families? We had 2 spouses attempt suicide in 2020 with all the riots going on. So, there are so many spouses at home that are watching live feeds, that are streaming, from the protesters out there, and they're hearing the worst of the worst. They're seeing the worst of the worst. They're thinking the worst of the worst. And they're in the midst of that being ostracized from friends and family, just that might not agree, with things. So they're struggling, at home. So, I appreciated that opportunity, and it just has continued to grow from there with the wellness unit and continued training in the department for officers.
Yeah, and I think you're right. We had a mass shooting in our town, and obviously a very troubling time. Our officers, what we were trying to teach our officers is, when you go through this, you're talking to guys that are coming into work the next day, they still got blood on their uniforms. They didn't go to sleep the night before. And you're trying to convince, did you talk to your spouse about it? No, I didn't talk to your spouse. But you understand your spouse watched hours of TV in sheer horror, worried about you. They go through it with us, right? And trying to make that connection. And you're right, our EAP tried to open up to spouses and family members because the kids are affected. Daddy's not here. Is daddy alive? Is daddy dead? And I can't imagine going through that repeatedly. But the other thing with what you did with the resiliency training is talk about that foundation that you started with the beds that's still active, because I think it's important for people to understand when these things happen, we don't turn our backs on our communities. We dig in and get deeper into them, right? So please talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think that even doing that resilience and wellness training is recognizing and finding what are the positive aspects. How do we continue to, look at the positive, have a positive outlook, recognize, what we can be grateful for, because we live in a world of negativity.
That's right.
Everything is everyone's worst day. It is always, negative and challenging, and it is so easy in law enforcement to just get that negative, jaded worldview. So I think that was something that was so pivotal in my career, is just having an opportunity that my patrol partner and I work in a 2-man car, just like God opened up our eyes to a situation and, allowed us to come alongside a family. There was 2 little girls that we had responded to this house twice in the span of a week. The first time was just a disturbance where grandparents were trying to take care of those 2 little girls. And we could see that these calls were like around midnight, middle of the night. We're like, what's going on? The second time we went, the young girl was actually trying to kill herself. And we were able to intervene. We were able to get her the help that she needed. But we could see that both little girls were just sleeping on the floor. And it wasn't for lack of care and love for them. It wasn't abuse. It wasn't neglect. Just the grandparents were doing the best they could, but didn't have everything they needed. There was very little furniture in the house. Kids were sleeping on the floor. And my patrol partner and I, Ryan Gallagher, left that scene and we're like, just thinking that how many situations do we go into? There's a number of homes. It's not a daily occurrence, but it's a fairly regular occurrence that we can see that the kids aren't being abused, they aren't being neglected, but they don't have some of the things that most kids take for granted. And we couldn't think of a resource in the city to get them beds. So my partner and I just said, we'll do it on our own. So we went to IKEA, bought 2 brand new beds and bedding and stuffed animals, and came back and set them up for the kids ourselves, just all on our own. And out of that, that's kind of where this idea, was birthed. And we just said, we would love to do that for others. And we pitched the idea to our captain, and we got the Seattle Police Foundation as a nonprofit involved, and they said, yep, we'll support it. And so we just on our own, above and beyond, volunteered, to help get this off the ground. And we did it for 4 years just as a one-day event. Only criteria was that the kids, the beds were only going to kids that were sleeping on a floor and didn't have a bed of their own. And we were amazed. In the first year, we did 50 beds. The second year, over 100. The third year, over 300. And then the fourth year to the surrounding counties, and it was over 600 beds. So raising over 200,000, got local media involved, and it was just cool to see the kids and so many families that's like may not have always had that same kind of interaction with law enforcement, and to be, see officers in uniform coming in, setting up beds and, getting them. So it was a really cool situation. And they've continued on doing that with the Seattle Police Foundation every year as well now.
Jeremy, you said something to me over breakfast that someone had made a comment at one point about God in Seattle. What was that comment?
Yeah, he said that God has left the city a long time ago in a roll call.
Now, what kind of strikes me about this story is that people often go, where was your God when? Insert scenario here. That person was hit by a car and killed, that mass shooting happened. But God is in each of those actions, right? Like those beds that were given to kids, God works through people. And in this case, through officers. And every time you guys went in there and you went into that shooting at the bar, or you went into that home with the kids sleeping on the ground, God was there working through you guys. And I think that that's lost on a lot of people. Talk to us about your role in ministry and how the work that you did in law enforcement really brought you to where you are today. And tell us a little bit about the organization.
Yeah. God really worked in and through me. My first 2 years were challenging. I had difficult situations with critical incidents. It was an officer that was ambushed and murdered in my precinct hours before my shift started. Officer Timothy Brenton, Halloween of 2009. And then in my first year, the Lakewood 4 officers killed, and then Pierce County Deputy Kim Dell. So it was just a lot on me in my first year. And it took me a couple years before God got my attention. I put my job above my family, above everything else. I loved everything about it. But it got to the point that I recognized that it's an identity that we can take on, just one of pride and one of honor and one of sacrifice, and there's good in it. But I just recognized that there was so much that I was taking on, trying to control everything, trying to, show no weaknesses and trying to be there for everyone else, and just sacrificing so many things in my life that it got to the point that I had to surrender my life to the Lord. And I just said, God, I don't know what you have in, store for me, but I give my life to you. I need you. I can't do this on my own. And it was only through that my perspective started to change in everything that I was doing on the job. And God started opening up doors to where I was able to come alongside our department chaplain for a little bit, because I didn't know another Christian on the department, a department of 1,400. And so I didn't know what it looked like. With these identities, I started to realize, like, okay, I've got this identity at work. When I put my uniform on, I know what it looks like to be a good cop's cop. And then I'll go home and I'll try and be the best father and husband and go to church when I can, but my shift doesn't allow me much. And so I just realized, like, I can't live two different worlds. Like, I had to be the same person, have this strong identity, in who I am and who God's called me to be first and foremost. And that just transformed my life. Coming alongside our department chaplain of 38 years, shortly before he suddenly passed away, was again God's timing. I was then put in the position of executive director over our Seattle Police Chaplains Association. And even where there were some that were calling for us to just disband that chaplains program altogether, didn't think it was important and needed. There was others that stepped up and said, I think that we should continue this on. But they turned to me and said, okay, it's going to have to be you, Jeremy. So I was able to step up and help revive and, build up that program. And it just led in so many opportunities for me to where the road that I went when I needed to find God, when I needed to learn how to live for Christ as a police officer, and I struggled to find any resources. I struggled to find any ministries. And it was just on that path where, God was growing me as a police officer, opening doors and opening opportunities, and then slowly finding other Christian officers and slowly finding other ministries, that God just kept growing this burden, in me. And it just gave me amazing opportunities to come alongside other officers, doing peer support through the worst of the worst, calls. I mean, I can't even, tell you, just how you're coming alongside, officers in the worst of the worst. And I think that I just began to realize, like, we lose hope, and I feel like I began to realize more and more in my life, I needed hope and not to lose hope, like that's so easy to do in law enforcement. And for me, I recognized the only real hope that I could find was in a personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
I know you probably have a billion questions about the organization.
Yeah, please, let's talk more about that, because I'm totally fascinated by this, because a lot of it, I agree with you, doing EAP, and we had some similarities, a lot of similarities in our career. But the one thing I would say to a lot of officers too, and hopefully you'll agree with me, is, you go to those things, right? And those mass killings. And when I teach, I talk about my worst day was with a 3-month-old dying and an 11-month-old barely survived. And I used to always think, when I first showed up, like, God, please help. God did help, because God put us there to help the families, because we can't change what had happened, but we can surely do the best we can to help people navigate their life from this point forward. And instead of making it a bad experience, even though it's awful, you have to have something good come out of it, So we're grateful for God in our lives, and especially in law enforcement, because we are challenged so much. We really are challenged by so many things that we see and we have to do out there that really, sometimes we go to the F-bomb more than we go to the cross, right? So we have to be better and more intentional with God. So please talk more about your ministry.
Yeah. I just think that it was over the years of coming alongside chaplains programs and finally finding some ministries, good ministries that are out there, and doing that training, that resilience and wellness training, and just recognizing that there are more and more good resources out there for law enforcement, for their family members. But so much of it is secular resources, trauma therapies and addiction recovery programs, and there's good stuff out there. But there are not enough faith-based support programs out there. And then what is out there, I was beginning to realize they're all independent. They're all doing their own things. There's this program out here, and then there's this ministry over here, and there's this chaplain over here. And very few of them are aware of each other. Very few of them are working together, and very few of them have the support on the back end to be effective in what they're doing. So what God put, on our heart is to start Mission First Alliance. There's a Christian gospel-focused alliance of ministries and organizations and chaplains and churches and individuals and businesses, all that have a heart to bring Christ to our law enforcement and their family members. And we want to be uniting them and equipping them. We want to bring them together so that they can collaborate and work together and be more effective together. And then we want to come alongside them to be more effective in what God's called them to do. I'm so impressed on a daily basis how many active and retired law enforcement have nonprofits and ministries that they're trying to do the best they can to give back and support. but they're doing it on their own. They're trying to reinvent the wheel. They're trying to do it alone. They're scraping by, just grinding it out without much support or without much connection to anyone else. So I am excited to see what God's already doing. We're just coming up to our 1-year anniversary, February 10th, this Saturday. But we already have multiple national ministries involved in this, and local ministries, and active and retired law enforcement and spouses and churches wanting to be a part of this, and just saying like that we can be more effective together. Let's come together. So I'm excited what God's doing.
With your background, you could have retired from law enforcement, gone into the private sector, made a killing. And instead, you've decided to use the skills and the blessings in your life to bring people to God. How did that impact your relationship with your wife and your kids? Because I'm sure that's not an easy conversation to have, to be like, I mean, biblically, we're told basically sell all your stuff and go follow Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. That it's one thing to read that in the Bible. It's another thing to execute that in reality, but you did.
Yeah. It's been a journey for us. It's been one that my wife and I were praying through for years. Is one that my wife had to, to pray through and work through of like, what would it look like at 13 years on the Seattle Police Department without a full retirement? What would it look like if we packed up and went where God was calling us? And so we definitely worked through that. We definitely got to a point, and we definitely said that that this is what God's calling us to, and this is worth it. And there have been sacrifices along the way. It's been a tough journey, but the blessings have far outweighed it. And it is so cool to see what God is doing, that we don't regret it for a moment. Even our 4 kids, where we packed up and moved from Seattle to Tennessee, we had a lot of conversations with our kids, and we just said, that we feel like God's leading us in this way, and we see this as a family mission, that they're all involved in it. My kids were involved in the Beds for Kids program, out giving, beds to kids that didn't have, beds, and seeing what others don't have. And some of my older kids have gone out to Santiago, Chile on mission trips with our church. And my wife and I have gone to outside of Durban, South Africa, into a rural Zulu village on a couple of mission trips. So it's like we in our family just had that missions mindset. And I don't think that there was a lot of pushback once we felt like God was saying, go, it's time to go. And the whole family was on board.
Well, when you say God said it was time to go, you asked God a very specific question, and he gave you a very direct answer, right? I think you got to share that story, man.
Yeah, it was cool. We took a couple weeks to pray. As the vaccine mandate as a condition of employment came out, my wife and I said, okay, we're just going to take a week and pray. We're not making any decisions. And at the end of that first week, we're like, okay, we still don't have peace with it. We're going to take another week and we're going to pray about it. We're not making, a quick decision, an emotional decision. And it was in that second week that my wife and I picked up a new devotional. And the very first night that we read that devotional, we were just blown away. The title of that devotional said, Go. And it was talking about Matthew 28. And there's a little line in that devotion that stood out to us today that we'll never forget. It says, God's commanded you to go. You need permission to stay. We're like, oh, okay. That's hit, that definitely hits home. And then we got up and went to church the next morning on a Sunday morning. And it was an associate pastor preaching a standalone sermon that was not in the normal sermon series. And the title of his sermon on the screen the next morning was Go. And we're like, okay, Lord, I feel like you're saying something to us. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Shameless plug time. How can people get involved? How can people learn more? The floor is yours. MissionFirstAlliance.com is our website. Jump on our website and learn more. We have started in the last few months doing membership for nonprofits, organizations, ministries, businesses, chaplains, individuals that have a heart for first responders and spouses themselves to be a part of this, and then hopefully to grow this with churches. And we want them all to come into this community, into this alliance, to be able to work together more. So with that, we set up membership. It's free. There's a short application, and we'd love
to grow this alliance to 250 members this year in 2024. After just opening a membership a couple months ago, we already have over 35 local ministries and national ministries and chaplains and first responders themselves. So we want to grow that. And then we're just looking for support as well. Like we can clearly see what God is doing, and that this is a ministry that is doing what no other ministry is doing in our country. And where I'm sure you can, testify as law enforcement, we're good at isolating ourselves. And it's no different among the chaplains and ministries. They're all isolated. And so we are doing what no other ministry is doing and bringing them all together. And with that, we need the financial support as a nonprofit to be able to do this as well, to be able to grow this, to be able to do this effectively. So we want everyone to come alongside us, and we are uniting and equipping all who have a heart for our nation's first responders. So,
brother, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah,
Bernie, parting thoughts?
Thank you and congratulations. Your 1 year anniversary is approaching. My commitment to you is that we have 8 chaplains at my old police station, and I'm going to reach out to them, and I'm going to ensure that they'll reach out to you. This needs to grow. And, a lot of times we could take this information, do nothing with it, and we know what happens. It finds its way to the bottom of the pile. You're going to be on the top of the pile today. We're going to make this happen. Thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Guys, thank you all so much for watching. Thanks for hitting that share button. Thanks for supporting this incredible organization. Bernie?
Mom, love you.
God bless you all. God bless America.